like a Devotion Mirror. I think this matchup is pretty close.
Yeah, this is definitely the you know, certainly the two most popular decks in the format, if not the two best.
Tom is going to start off with a very nice looking Thoughtseize. He's going to see a hand here of Thassa. You got Cyclonic Rift, a Jace, a Cloudfin Raptor, and a Tidebinder Mage. I'm very surprised not to see a Cloudfin Raptor come down on turn number 1.
Yes, this is a curious sequence.
Not quite sure what happened here for Bryce. Well, Tom can make up for it. He just takes the Raptor with the Thoughtseize,
and then
all's kosher. Or probably going to take the Thassa, which is the best card in the hand, and arguably the best card in the deck.
Yep.
So Bryce is going to take his draw step here. There's a Nykthos off the top. 4 copies of those in Bryce's version of Mono Blue. A little surprising to see that many of those.
Yeah, I've seen certainly some lists. 1 is kind of an industry standard. I've occasionally seen a second one, but 4 is quite a few.
So now there is the Cloudfin Raptor, going to pass the turn back. Martell's going to take a draw step. He's got a couple of Heroes Downfalls in his hand. You see a Desecration Demon. He's got an Underworld Connections as well. I'm not sure if Tom has a 3rd land. Now, you see those swamps out there, Patrick. I think you're a fan of those?
Yeah, betas are nice.
Yeah.
They're still reasonably affordable, too. I think beta basics are sort of the floor of what your basic land should be if you're playing in tournaments. And I really appreciate the matching art, particularly after spending Grand Prix Albuquerque burning a lot of Sam Black's matches, which is just, looks like he shook out the draft box lands or whatever.
Something that Brian Kibler does not advocate.
Yeah. Sam,
Tidebinder Mage.
Sam, the kids look up to you for these sorts of things. You can't
get some real lands.
Just have the same art. Yeah. Just have the same art.
Cloudfin Raptor is going to become a 1/2. Going to come across into the red zone as Martell's going to draw a card. And I think this is what I feared here. I'm not quite sure if he has another land. It looks like he may have drawn a Devour Flesh for the turn, but you see connections in his hand. He's got some other stuff, but I don't think land number 3 is hiding out over there. And there is a Devour Flesh. Going to main phase that. Let Ruff decide what he wants to sacrifice. Wants to obviously keep the devotion count down, keep his head above water, but Martell does not have a 3rd land. How many lands are in his deck? Probably 25-ish?
22, 20, 26.
26, wow.
A lot of lands.
Cloudfin Raptor is going to bite the dust, so Tidebinder Mage is going to hang around. More devotion for that one, also more power as well, so I think a pretty easy choice there for Bryce.
And Bryce without a 4th land of his own, or a 3rd blue source for his Nightveil Spectre in hand.
Cyclonic Rift, I think he's got a Judge's Familiar hanging out over there as well, so that's probably going to come down. And oddly enough, Judge's Familiar is going to be pretty good this game. Counter removal spells just because Tom is land light, and now Tidebinder Mage is going to come across. Tom does draw land, so there's land number 3, and we'll see if he wants to start firing away Heroes Downfalls, which he's going to have to use anyway, or if he wants to deploy that Underworld Connections that he has in his hand.
It's a little rough to just fire off the Hero's Downfall here into the face of this Judge's Familiar, but there is an argument for just keeping Bryce's permanent count as light as possible.
Also save him a point of damage, which actually could end up being a little bit relevant, so I could certainly see an argument for wanting to do this here. And Tom is going to pass the turn, it looks like. The hand is ready, and he does pass. So Ruff is going to draw a card. He finds a Nightveil Spectre that he cannot cast.
I believe he can cast it now, right? Because
I guess he does have enough. Yeah, he does have enough.
Funnel through his Nykthos.
So he's going to start by attacking. Now, I would be a little bit surprised if Tom doesn't fire off one now. There we go. So now there is the Hero's Downfall, and it does take care of the Tidebinder Mage. So that Judge's Familiar is going to deal 1. Bryce is going to follow up with another Judge's Familiar and pass the turn back.
Trying to pin Martell with his mana situation being the way that it is. I think I would have preferred to keep the Tidebinder Mage if you had a second Judge's Familiar in hand, but
I'm inclined to agree, as here is a Thoughtseize from Martell. You'll see a hand of the Nightveil Spectre, Cyclonic Rift, and Jace, Architect of Thought. So Martell knew 2 of those. The mystery card has been revealed. We'll see if Martell decides he wants to take her, and what does he care the most about? Because now he's not really underneath a substantial amount of pressure. I think Jace makes for an interesting game that does come into play next turn.
Yeah, it feels like Jace is the card to take here, as it just represents so much power if Bryce draws a 4th land.
And Jace is what Martell does decide on. That's the turn back here. So Ruff is going to draw a card for the turn. It's a Frostburn Weird.
Not the best draw, but it is something that allows him to make use of some of his mana this turn and really enable that Nykthos in following turns.
Yeah. We'll see how Ruff wants to start his turn. He's going to start by tapping some mana for the Frostburn Weird. That is good to go, and now in come the Judge's Mirror. He's going to knock Martell down to 10. And while the Thoughtseizes have actually been pretty good from Tom, taking care of a Thassa and a Jace, you know, the 2 points of life loss that he has been dealt from each one of those is really adding up in this game. And he's underneath a relevant amount of pressure now.
Yes.
Because Frostburn Weird has shown up.
And this is a place where the Mono Black Devotion deck can struggle in my mind. It's not terribly mana efficient, as we know Judge's Familiar.
Oh, okay, so he is going to use Judge's Familiar. Pass the turn back. Tom, I think, trying to get away with that again since it worked on the Tidebinder Mage the first time. And now a land off the top there for Ruff. But as you said, how it struggles with its mana development sometimes?
Yeah, it's well, not necessarily its mana development, but it's not that mana efficient. And the games where it's missing its land drops, it's especially pronounced because the deck has so many 3 and 4 mana spells that it's really hard for it to be doing anything other than just playing 1 spell a turn.
Yeah. So the Weird and the Familiar are going to come in. 3 activations on the Weird. Going to make it attack for 5 total. Going to knock Martell down to 5. Martell draws another card. It is not a land. So now he has to deploy a Pack Rat as a chump blocker and pass the turn back, but Martell knows has been a Cyclonic Rift in his hand. So Ruff draws a card, draws another copy of Nykthos. As powerful as Nykthos is, backup copies, especially in this particular form of Devotion, are not as powerful as like when you're playing with green-red Devotion or base-red Devotion.
Yeah, I mean, even that Nykthos actually did allow Bryce to have lethal that turn, as he could have made enough mana here to be pumping.
Passing the turn back, so Martell's down to 4.
And he's holding up the Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's not passing. He's
okay, so he can play, yeah, he can filter through, play Nightveil Spectre. Martell draws a Mutavault. I'm not sure if that's going to do anything for Tom here. Again, he has 2 Grey Merchants in his hands. He has an Underworld Connections, which he obviously can't work with here. And now he has a Desecration Demon.
We know about the Cyclonic Rift, but Martell is going to make him do it.
Yeah, make your opponent kill you. I think Bryce has made some missteps along the way in this game, so I think it's smart of Tom to actually make him actually, you know, go through the motions of actually killing him, because you never know, he could make a mistake, and it looks like he may have here. Looks like Martell's going to be given the opportunity to block. Looks like he may be talking to the, yeah, maybe it looks like he's asking the judge a question here about the Desecration Demon and this whole thing.
Yep.
With the trigger, and you know, it's I wouldn't say it's worded the best with this one, the confusion on Desecration Demon. I know that Ricky Ayashi, one of the judges and writes for Star City Games, wrote an article just based off of the Desecration Demon trigger and how it goes about announcing it and when you're supposed to do it and all of these things that go along with this. So yeah, so now you see the players backing up here because now it's Declaration of Attack. Now Desecration Demon gets sacked, and now the attack, and now the pumps, and now that's going to do it. Okay, so Bryce Ruff does win game number 1 over Tom Martell in the Devotion Mirror, you can say. Mono Blue Devotion up a game over Mono Black.
But these are very different. You know, the Mono Black Devotion deck is very much about, you know, controlling opposing permanents and eventually overpowering you with card advantage and Desecration Demon and Grey Merchant. The Mono Blue Devotion deck is much more about getting an edge on the board. So even though they're Devotion decks, the way they're trying to capitalize on that mechanic and the outputs they're trying to generate, very different things.
You've got Martell's deck list in front of you. He's down a game, going to be on the play for game number 2. So what's he going to be sideboarding in to change some things here?
Well, he has access to Doomblade, which I believe that he would want here. And he has access to Duress, 3 copies on the board. I'm not sure if Duress is great here. The Mono Blue Devotion deck does have some spells, most notably Jace. And additionally, if it has sideboard cards to bring in against you, it's likely to be more spells at the expense of creatures. So Duress goes up in quality in the post-board games in general, but I'm not sure if he, you know, it's fairly narrow. It's going to miss a fair percentage of the time, so I'm not positive he's going to want to bring that in as well. He also has 3 copies of Varika's Cure, which again answers a narrow range of Bryce's creatures, but not all of them, and certainly not the most powerful ones, though it can contain some Cloudfin Raptor, Judge's Familiar type draws.
We'll take a look at Ruff's sideboard here. He's got 4 copies of Rapid Hybridization, a Dissolve, a Domestication, a Aetherling, and a Gate, a Gainsay, an Omen Speaker, 3 copies of Swan Song, a Jace Architect of Thought, and a Cyclonic Rift. So, in this matchup, it's kind of weird, I think, how he has to adjust because, I think a lot of the one-drops are actually poor in this matchup because Mono Black has so much removal that you want to be able to kind of try to go toe for toe with them on kind of control axis, but at the same time, their deck has Underworld Connection, so how well can you actually do that? A card that's very important in this matchup is Bident of Thassa, which Bryce has 1 of in his main deck and no additional ones in his sideboard. So he's going to rely on actually Jace as being a card drawing engine, which he has 2 in his main deck and 1 in his sideboard. I kind of actually like Aetherling, but I don't know if you can actually craft a situation where that can be a game-ending threat. Dissolve I also think is okay, but Thoughtseize kind of blows up that plan, and you don't know how much each player is going to be tapping out and if he can actually leave 3 mana available. So there's a lot of options here. Negate, another card I think is really, really good in this matchup as well. So I'm not really sure the best way to go about sideboarding in this particular matchup.
Well, I think Bryce still needs to maintain a lot of his aggressive elements. It's really hard to beat the Mono Black Devotion deck going long, even with things like Jace and the 1 Bident and what have you. And the Mono Black Devotion deck is pretty inefficient in the first 2 turns of the game and then becomes pretty efficient in turns 3 and beyond. So you need to get some edge going in the first 2 turns to force it to either be on the back foot or use removal spells it wants to save or those kind of things. You can't just let the Mono Black Devotion deck make its land drops uncontested. You need to be pressuring it somehow. So I don't mind having a couple additional counter spells because the Black Devotion deck has some 4 and 5 mana stuff. You're going to find good targets for your counters. But Bryce still needs to maintain himself fundamentally as an aggressive player in this matchup.
All right. Both players do present the decks to each other, so they are happy with their sideboard configuration. I guess, of course, excuse me, if you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star Games Open Series here in Oakland, California. At SCG Live, hashtag SCGOAK for your tweets. We have our Twitters ready for you guys for any questions, comments, all that good stuff. Shoot us one. We'll be here all weekend long. Standard action today, legacy action tomorrow. I know some important football games taking place for you. I think your Giants are in town this weekend. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm missing the game, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It may be for the better because if I was at Giants at Chargers, the odds that I get arrested is reasonably high. So maybe it's for the best, but I am missing that game.
I wouldn't really say you're missing it. Both those teams are horrible.
But the Giants, man, that NFC East, 9-7 that's round 1 we're playing at home in the Meadowlands.
Yeah. And that really just says a lot.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. Martell going to take a look. He's keeping it. To start off with a Swamp as we are underway in game number 2 here. An Island from Ruff, so no 1-drop yet again, but he was able to win game 2 in spite of that.
Well, he kind of had a 1-drop game 1.
Sure.
It was present.
Here's a 2-drop. What's it going to be? It's going to be Frostburn Weird. Martell shrugs and says that's fine. You see a Temple of Deceit off the top of his deck. I don't think he had another black source of mana as he scries. You see a Mutavault in his hand. He scries, he keeps it. I think he's got a couple of Nightveil Specters hanging out as well. Wouldn't be surprised if that top card is the 3rd black source that he's looking for. Nykthos for Ruff. Oddly enough, he can't cast his Nightveil Specter either. Let's see if Tom has a removal spell here or not. He does not. He's going to take at least 1. It looks like it's going to be 3. 2 activations from the Frostburn. Going to put Martell on 17. Swamp right off the top. There is Nightveil Specter. And that is probably the most important card in this matchup.
Yeah, it's a great blocker and allows also the Mono Black deck to go ahead and start taking a lot of the cards off the Mono Blue Devotion deck. Once you have an island, everything you're getting is sweet from there. And Nightveil Specter also is a live card to hit as well.
Yeah, you see Judge's Familiar going to come down here for Ruff. It might be on chump blocking due to this turn, not sure. But this is this card, Nightveil Specter, is really interesting to me because its growth over the course of this metagame evolution has been insane.
Yes.
It went from, a card that at the Pro Tour that you played at, Dragon's Maze in San Diego, you see a Rapid Hybridization going to attempt to take care of this. It went from a card that was seeing some sideboard play as like a shift in strategy in the Esper Mirror to now it's seeing main deck play to now I need to play a card that actually deals with this because it can dominate a game all by itself.
Yeah, when Devotion got announced as the mechanic, I think the card that everyone first pointed to was Boros Reckoner.
Yeah.
It was the most obvious, kind of the most powerful of these triple hybrid mana cards, but Night Veil Spectre has turned out to be the real keeper here.
You see, the first one taken care of by Rapid Hybridization, so it's going to give Martell a 3/3 token, but now a second one is going to show up to the party, and you see just exactly how important that card is. That Bryce was willing, to use a card to give Martell 3/3 just so that card's not in play. But a follow-up one now is going to really cause some problems. And you speak of how Boros Reckoner was the card that people really did look towards for Devotion, and rightfully so. I mean, I think you could say that Boros Reckoner is probably a more powerful card than Night Veil Spectre in a vacuum, but Night Veil Spectre's impact on this metagame and just how it can dominate a game all its own, and we've seen the dream scenarios, obviously, of hitting the perfect card on top and winning the game because of it. It is a mighty powerful card.
Yeah, and Night Veil Spectre is also especially good against other decks that play Night Veil Spectre.
Yeah.
So that, magnifies its importance in these matchups quite a bit.
You see Ruff going to play a Night Veil Spectre of his own, so those guys are going to stare at each other for a little while, but I believe Martell has at least one removal spell that he can actually use to clear out that Night Veil Spectre and get into the red zone with his. And now there is a Hero's Downfall that you see. He has tap mana and thumb forward, and he is going to kill that. So Tom takes care of Ruff's Night Veil Spectre, and he's going to come to the red zone with just his 2/3 flyer. We'll see if Justice Familiar is feeling frisky or not.
This feels like too early to be jumping to me, but Bryce is going to put his Familiar out in front.
Tom going to play a Nykthos. And he's just going to pass the turn back. So now you see a Tidebinder Mage drawn off the top here for Ruff. He has Jace in his hand. He definitely has some things that he can do with his mana. Not a big Nykthos turn coming here for the Mono Blue Devotion player. But he needs to figure out a way to deal with that Night Veil Spectre because, again, it just threatens to take over the game by itself. Another one will certainly be a step in the right direction. Looks like Tom has another removal spell. Yep, another Hero's Downfall.
And this is sort of what I was talking about when I was mentioning that Bryce had to maintain an aggressive posture in the matchup. If you're just playing one spell a turn against Mono Black Devotion, you're kind of doomed from the start. The deck is so good at responding one for one. You need to be getting out in front of it early and really pressuring it, making it play inefficiently.
Tom gets in with the Spectre. He does hit a land, and it's almost like every card that he hits now is good. He's already got a blue mana from the Temple of the Seat, so now he's got an additional blue mana with the island, so he can probably cast all of the spells he hits off a Night Veil Spectre now. Gonna play that island as his land drop for the turn. And again, he does have copies of Grey Merchant in his hand. It looks like he's gonna deploy his first one, which he does, so this is gonna be a drain and gain for 5. I'm probably just happy to pass the turn back. Gary the Grey Merchant.
Island, the draw for Bryce here. And it's really rough for him to deploy these Jaces too because, lingering in the background that we haven't even mentioned is Martell has 2 copies of Mutavault at the ready as well. So even though the Weird looks like it blocks a considerable amount of Tom's pressure, those Mutavaults make it really hard to try to land Jace.
Yeah. And those Mutavaults are something that are just incredibly powerful in this deck. Obviously pumping up Pack Rat a little bit, but just the pressure they can put on a Planeswalker and the things they can do. They're quite powerful in this deck, and powerful in general. So you see Bryce is tapping some mana. He's got 4 mana tapped again. He has another Night Veil Spectre in his hand. He's going to deploy a Jace here. So now that's going to go up to 5. He's just going to pass the turn back, going to try to play a little bit of defense.
This is still going to be pretty rough, and again, that Night Veil Spectre represents so much advantage for Martell uncontested here. Every spell that he draws is reasonably powerful here, and a lot of the things that come off the top of Bryce's deck are quite powerful as well. So
you mentioned the Mutavaults, he immediately sets them across and into the red zone, so it looks like he is gearing up to get in a lot of damage this turn. And there you see Pro Tour champion.
Yeah, ideally he would be able to send the Night Veil Spectre at Bryce and everything else at Jace. If he has a removal spell for the Weird, then he can execute this. Otherwise, he has to He may either have to send the Night Vale Spectre at Jace as well. Maybe he allows Jace to stay in play for one turn, but that's his ideal distribution. So Martell going through the various permutations right now.
What to do? What to do? Now, one thing I know, you've known Tom for a while. I've known Tom for a while as well, and I've certainly watched him play a lot of Magics.
A glacial pace
Yeah.
at times.
I was going to use meticulous. I was looking for a fun way to describe how Tom plays. It's slow.
Yes.
It's slow and steady does win the race. But he always likes to make sure that he gets everything right. And you give Tom enough time to think about the right play, he's oftentimes going to find it. So he's going to send Night Vale Spectre towards Bryce. The rest are going to go towards Jace. So he wants to start whittling that thing away and just continue to build an advantage that Bryce won't be able to come back from.
Yeah. He can afford, he's got enough cards both in hand and through the Night Vale Spectre. He can afford to throw this Mutavault into a Frostborn Weird to contain Jace. I believe he has a cure in his hand. He can use it to finish off the Weird if he's feeling so inclined.
So damage is going to resolve here. Jace is going to go down to 2. Trigger Judge's Familiar off of the Night Vale Spectre. Now you see him slide that Nykthos across because the Nykthos activation right now would be for 5. It'd be 5 black mana, and he can figure out what he wants to do with that if he has anything great to deploy here.
So
looks like he's just going to cast Judge's Familiar. Going to play a Swamp. He's going to cast a Pharika's Cure to take care of that Frostborn Weird. A card I wasn't sure if he was going to sideboard in or not.
Yeah.
Certainly some targets, and I think one of the reasons that he does actually want to sideboard in is because I think what happens a lot in this matchup is that Night Vale Spectres actually run into each other, and then you can finish it off with the Pharika's Cure.
And it's also, once Tom is able to weather the storm of the first 2 turns, I feel like he has a pretty big edge. Not that the Mono Blue Devotion deck is going to put on that much pressure that early in the game, but that's his place to get an edge. Yeah. And then, then you're matching 3 mana spells for 4 mana spells, and all the while this early blue creature start you got is whittling away the life total.
Now, of course, that card can't take care of Master of Waves. That's the obvious interaction between Pharika's Cure, with Pharika's Cure, but I don't think that Pharika's Cure is, that great of a card. Or, I don't think Master of Waves is that great of a card in this matchup. I don't think he's bringing in Pharika's Cure to take care of that card.
Yeah, the 12 Doomblade deck is not that worried about.
Yeah.
But it's a nice bonus.
So you see Jace is going to get cashed in here. You got a Nykthos, you got a Tidebinder Mage, and you have a Frostburn Weird.
I think,
he's show him the hand and just say, all right, I can't beat what you've got, so let's go to a 3rd and final one. So Bryce Ruff is going to concede game number 2. And the match between Tom Martell and Bryce Ruff is going to move on to a 3rd and final.
And again, this is sort of the signature matchup of the format at this point.
Yep.
Especially if you were looking at the coverage of Grand Prix Albuquerque, where those 2 decks were so heavily featured in the top 8 and the top 16.
Yeah.
And was also the finals of that Grand Prix as well.
Sam Pardee versus Owen Turtenwald. I know Owen is in Dallas right now playing the Grand Prix, but you've got Sam Pardee actually here in attendance. Wouldn't be surprised if he's running back old Mono Blue. I know he said he is a big fan of that deck, and his results wouldn't surprise me.
I ran into him in a Magic Online 8-man a week or 2 ago, and he comfortably defeated me with Mono Blue Devotion after he mulliganed 2-4. So
wow.
Yeah, wow is right.
It is party time, as they say.
Like, the game wasn't really close. And
what were you playing?
The red-white, something I've been working a little bit on, something close to the Joe Demestrio deck from Grand Prix Albuquerque.
Sure, the Magic Online, the deck that won the Magic Online.
Alico, I believe, who's a European, former WoW TG player, now Magic player. I kind of know.
Okay.
He won the Mox this month with a red-white, basically burn deck.
Yeah.
Joe Demestrio played it to a top 16 at Grand Prix Albuquerque. Actually beat me on day 1 with that deck, and I've been playing it a little bit online. Changed around some cards because not really a huge fan of Anger of the Gods and Chandra's Phoenix in the same game 1 deck, because those cards don't make sense in the same deck. So I cut the Anger of the Gods for a couple Boros Reckoners and messed around with a couple other numbers or whatever, and I've been playing it a bit.
To any success?
I've been playing it to break-even results or whatever, which means that I've won, 75% of my matches online.
Daily events, rest in peace.
Yeah. See you soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I count my metrics by tickets up or tickets down, and
Sure.
I think I'm probably within 5 tickets in either direction of my initial buy-in with the deck. So,
Sure.
which means I've actually been winning at an insane clip because that's just how it works.
Well, we'll see if anything does change here between these two players. They do finish up shuffling and sideboarding. Again, mono black diversion versus mono blue. Game 3, Bryce Ruff will be on the play. His list is a little bit different than what we've seen Sam Black and some other people play. He has 4 Nykthos in his main deck, no Mutavaults, only 1 Biden of Thassa, where we've seen a 2-2 split between Bidens and Jaces in the main deck. He also has 3 copies of Cyclonic Rift in his main deck as well. So we'll see how it goes. So far, sitting at 1-1 in a third game against a Pro Tour champion.
Yeah. I think with some metagame shifting, that red-white deck could actually be pretty good. I think the problem with it right now is one of the major incentives to play that deck is it's the most powerful Chandra deck you can really build, and Chandra is pretty poor against mono. It's especially bad against mono blue, and also not that good against mono black. I think that's the biggest problem with the deck is, your most powerful card is just not great against the most prevalent decks.
Yeah. At some point, Chandra's going to see a lot of play, though.
That card is really powerful.
Yeah.
I feel it's very similar to, a Ajani getting printed in M11 or M12, and the metagame just not really being right for it.
Yep.
And now it gets reprinted, and it's a no-brainer all-star in one of the best decks in the format.
Yep.
A lot of times it's just, does time and circumstance allow certain cards to show up? Not that the cards aren't powerful enough, for whatever that means. It's just some things require particular decks or particular strategies, and the enablers might not be there, or the metagame might be particularly hateful towards that kind of strategy, whatever. But Chandra is really good.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's great right now.
All right. See Tom taking a look. He doesn't look thrilled with his hand, but he is going to keep. Bryce is going to start off with just an island and pass the turn back. No thoughts he's here from Tom in the opening turns of the game, so action will probably start on the second turn here. Let's see what Bryce has to do. He's got a Thassa and a Jace in his hand. And he has a Tidebinder Mage. All right, so he does have a second. He does have a play on turn 2. We'll see what Tom does have. Tom with a Freakish Cure says, get that out of here. Move up to 22. And pass it back.
So if Tom's hand is really removal heavy, this is potentially the type of game where Thassa really shines.
Yeah. This is where Thassa and Jace are at home because, I think Tom's hand obviously lines up quite well against Nightveil Spectre.
Yeah.
And, trying to win the game that way. But, if it's a Thassa hand, a lot of manipulation for Ruff to be able to set things up moving forward. Also has a Jace as well to be able to set things up moving forward. So
also just a lot of card advantage, and Thassa just represents so many turns of if you don't leave your defenses up, then you're potentially getting hit for 5 because I have something that allows me to get to the required devotion.
See a Grey Merchant going to come off the top here. Martell just plays a Mutavault and pass the turn back. So Thassa is in. Time to scry. Keep it is what Ruff will do. And there's a Nykthos.
So we'll see if it wants to deploy Jace or Tiebinder Mage or his Nightveil Spectre.
It is going to be Nightveil Spectre. And, yep, predictably, Hero's Downfall. Want to keep that devotion count down, of course. Grey Merchant off the top here for Tom. Going to attack with Mutavault. Going to get in 2 points of damage. Might as well.
Yep. And Bryce getting really rewarded for playing that Nightveil Spectre last turn, as the most likely way it gets answered is Hero's Downfall, which then opens the path for Jace to land.
Yeah. I think now is a pretty good time to deploy that Planeswalker. So he is going to go reaching for 4 mana, and there is Jace. See if he's going to go up or down. He's going to go up with this one. How do you feel about that as opposed to just going down?
I like going up there because of the Mutavault.
Okay.
You can go down next turn once you have more of your defenses set up.
Okay. Martell going to deploy a Grey Merchant. Gain 2, drain 2 going to take place. So Ruff going to go down to 16. Martell going to go up to 24. Martell working his way toward building a devotion count. Scry going to put the top card on the bottom.
So Bryce here with a hand of just lands. So were I in his position here, I think I would minus Jace and try to find some sort of action, or Tiebinder Mage, now that the leftover in his hand is just lands. This does turn on his Thassa, which allows him to attack. I'll knock Martell down to 19. And then it appears Bryce missed an activation there with his Jace. But still at 5 loyalty here, so no threat of it getting killed on board. Tom mulling over his options here.
He's got a handful of them. He's going to start by scrying.
He has access to Grey Merchant and Devour Flesh here. A lot of removal in hand, but he still needs to whittle down that Jace. He needs to be concerned about Thassa getting turned on periodically and hitting him. So even though he's got a pretty powerful hand, there's still definitely things that can go wrong in this game. So
yeah, it just speaks to the power of Thassa now.
Yes,
because I mean this card is completely ridiculous. And it's already hit Tom once.
Yeah.
So I mean he's sitting at 19 at this point, but he has to fear that it's just going to keep happening, and now he has to use a card like Freakish Cure here, which is fine. That's a fine use of the card, but he has to just worry about keeping this thing down as long as he possibly can. He's going to start working on Jace a little bit too. So now Thassa Scry. The funny thing about Thassa is, I guess, it really shouldn't come as much of a surprise that it's the best god. The cheapest one, it's blue.
Yeah, no surprise.
I don't know how we didn't all see this coming.
We joked about this at the office a lot. It's like, yeah, of course the best one is the cheap blue one.
Yeah.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
It's like we haven't played Magic our entire lives or something.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, this card's just like, okay. I mean, how good is Scry? It's whatever. How good is unblockable? Blue decks don't attack. Who cares? I don't know how come we just didn't all put the pieces together right away.
There's plenty of matchups where just 3 mana, you get to scry 1 every turn would be an not unreasonable card.
That would be acceptable.
Yeah.
So we saw Ruff just pass the turn back here. So Martell fires up Mutavault. He's going to get Grey Merchant and Mutavault over towards Jace. 2 triggers, so it's going to be attacked for exactly 2 points of damage, and Thassa is not turned on right now. So here's 2 mana. Looks like this is a Cyclonic Rift.
Assuming on the Grey Merchant.
Yep. So you see Tom is trying to explain exactly what is going on here. He wants to make sure that the game state is correct. It looks like the timing of that was incorrect here. Looks like he may have said damage resolves or my Jace is dead or something and tried to back up. So now Tom is going to deploy a Desecration Demon and pass the turn back. So the Cyclonic Rift is still in Ruff's hand.
So Bryce now just going on tap, probably trying to set up an overloaded Rift at this point, I would imagine.
And you see a scry take place there. You see Bryce's hand right now. He's got that Nykthos still. He's had for a couple of turns now because he can't deploy that one because of the other one that's already in play. Cyclonic Rift that we know about, and then he just drew another Chase for the turn. So he is going to deploy the Planeswalker and see what he wants to do with it. He's going to go down immediately and he's going to turn over a Bident, a Rapid Hybridization, and a Frostburn Weird.
Reasonably loaded, although, Bident doesn't look that impressive because of, Bryce's lack of permanence, but just 2 blue devotion with the Thassa in play means something.
Yeah. And Bident is, arguably the most important card in this matchup. The problem here is that I don't know how good Bident is currently in this particular game state. Yes. I think that's the big issue. It's just not great in this game state right now.
Well, the 2 blue devotion is the most important thing. It's 2 blue devotion that Tom really can't get off the board.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of trying to win the game with a Coastal Piracy effect, I think that's very unlikely. Tom's got a pretty commanding board presence and more removal in hand. Tom debating, mulling over the split. It's weird because all 3 of the cards, they are, in my mind, these 3 cards are all pretty close to each other in terms of value.
Yeah.
There's Rapid Hybridization, which is an efficient removal spell, but Tom can probably win the game if the pace of the game is going like that. There's the Bident, which is he can't cast this turn, and Bryce can't attack for a while, but it is 2 guaranteed blue devotion. There's the Weird, which is a great blocker, but Tom's got a lot of removal, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of A lot of little things going on here. And keep in mind, Tom is also aware of the presence of Cyclonic Rift in Bryce's hand, as that got exposed last turn. So that also influences these.
So Hybridization is going to go to the bottom. The Frostburn Weird and the Binder are going to go to Ruff's hand, but he can't play the Frostburn Weird now because of the way that he tapped the mana for the Jade, or for the Jace, excuse me. So he just has to pass the turn back representing Cyclonic Rift, which again Tom does know about. Tom draws a Thought Seize for the turn. I guess you could say that's a good Magic card.
Certainly here. Bryce's hand has cards with game text on them, so Thoughtseize is pretty good here.
You do see the exact hand. Again, Tom now knows all the contents of Cyclonic Rift, Biden, Frostburn Weird, and Nykthos, and now he can craft his game plan accordingly at the cost of 2 life.
I would assume that we are just looking to take Cyclonic Rift here and go beatdowns, but
yeah.
And
I think I like that choice as well. I think at this point, Biden is obsolete outside of the devotion that it's going to provide, and Frostburn Weird not really going to do very much.
So now, one of Tom's Mutabolts can finish off the Jace, and Bryce's hand of just ground creatures is not going to provide much resistance to Desecration Demon as well.
So Tom trying to figure out exactly how he wants to move forward here, because he does have another Grey Merchant in his hand. So, how much do I care about Jace? Do I just attack Jace with my Grey Merchant, Desecration Demon, you down to 10? And then, can he kill him this turn or no? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So he's a little bit short. So yeah, I think, Grey Merchant goes there. Desecration Demon goes upstairs. Ruff loses his Planeswalker and goes down to 10, and then Grey Merchant's going to be a gain and drain of 6. So Martell will move up to 25. Ruff will move down to 4, and then comfortably pass the turn back.
Yeah. And so he has a lethal demon and also has, 3 2-power creatures in play and shows a hand of not much to do, and Tom escapes 2 games to 1.
Yeah. So Tom Martell is going to win this game and the match. Mono Black Devotion does defeat Mono Blue Devotion. I guess that means Mono Black Devotion is a better deck. Maybe that's not true. I don't know.
I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think it works. I don't think it works that way.
Yeah. Either way, the Pro Tour champion will be moving on to 2-1. And we'll see if he can keep it going with this deck that, again, he did play at Grand Prix Albuquerque